Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bytes, Katana Zero. My first exposure to Katana Zero was during AGDQ 2019. The showcase speedruns interrupted by neon emblazoned ads that immediately caught my eye with heavy-hitting action, vibrant retro visuals, and a synthwave soundtrack. With each iteration of the ad, it was elevated higher on my most wanted list until finally sitting snug in the top. Now that the game has been released, does ASCIIsoft's offering live up to that promise, or will it remain the stuff of neon dreams? Katana Zero is at its core a side-scrolling action game with a healthy dose of puzzle solving. Each of the game's 11 stages are divided into rooms filled with bad guys and occasionally lasers, and it's on the player to utilise their sword, time-bending abilities, and thrown objects to carve a path through the level and its inhabitants. That's where the game's core mechanic, time manipulation, comes in handy. Each time you die in a level, you aren't simply treated to a quick game over screen and a retry prompt, but are instead rewinded to the beginning of the room to give it another go. This design lends itself to a cycle of trial and error, using what you learn from each failure to better navigate and slaughter the room. In Katana Zero, to die isn't to fail, but to learn and adapt to its finely crafted challenges. It's a good mechanic proven by the likes of Super Meat Boy, and Katana Zero mostly gets it right, but only mostly. The main problem is that levels aren't always consistent between these rewinds. You might start a level with an enemy walking away from you, only to find he's headed toward you after a rewind. This throws your plan completely out of whack, tossing out the lessons you've learned and the adaptations you've made. Each level begins with a button prompt to begin planning, yet takes no umbrage with removing your ability to do so in the most frustrating of ways. Your other time manipulating ability is to slow it down with the push of the L button. Now this is really cool, allowing you to do things like reflect single bullets, roll through the spray of a shotgun, and slaughter groups of enemies within a split second. Scouting out a room, taking stock of your options, and using this to pull it all off is pretty satisfying, particularly when you get to watch it all play out in real time upon completion of the level. You'll commit this time-assisted murder with two tools, the primary of which is, as the title suggests, your katana, a swing of which will kill most enemies instantly. It's a pretty simple weapon, but the game challenges your use of it pretty effectively with enemies that can block or parry it, as well as testing your aim with it when deflecting bullets. Your secondary tool is a bit more dynamic. Levels are often littered with knives, smoke bombs, Molotov cocktails, and other paraphernalia of destruction, all of which you can pick up and throw at unsuspecting targets. While the basic ones have the very simple use of being tossed, the real challenge and fun comes in combining it with your other options to tackle a difficult room of bad guys, and you'll feel like a real badass when you pull it off. You have a ton of control over both of these weapons, a near 360-degree range with which to slash and throw with any screw-ups you make being punished. For example, if you aim a little too low when trying to deflect a bullet, your head's getting blown off. This adds to the challenge in a satisfying way for the most part, but it doesn't come without its drawbacks. The issue is that the game doesn't compensate for you in any way. One of the most frustrating things for me is when my character does something I didn't do, and while most games will make adjustments to your actual intent by accounting for things like enemy placement, Katana Zero places far greater import on fidelity to a rage-inducing degree. On paper, this is fantastic. Your character will perform actions with near exact precision to your input. In practice, however, this meant I was turning around when slashing upwards as my stick was a hair to the left of true up, screwing up my plans and getting me killed. The game goes to impressive and painstaking lengths to reflect every minute input, but it sacrifices the respective intent, causing unnecessary frustration for the player, or at least for me, because I'm bad. It's something you can adapt to, but by the time I had overcome it, credits were rolling. The game has a good variety of enemies to test your abilities, from crowbar swinging mobsters to shield wielding SWAT men, and they're all delivered at a steady pace, ensuring there's a new challenge constantly. The same can't be said for the environmental hazards, however. There are lasers dotted throughout some levels that eventually see one fairly novel usage, but that's it. It would have been nice to see a greater variety of environmental hazards, as well as something with a bit more challenge. Katana Zero also offers very little post-game activities. I don't really have a problem with this. The only additional task is to go back and find the 5 unlockable swords, which you then have no new challenges to use them in. There is word of a speedrun mode, which is quite exciting for me, and more levels on the way, but for now there is little incentive to go revisit the game once you've beaten it. Again, it doesn't really bother me, but it does feel like a little bit of a missed opportunity to make those unlockable swords mean something. Despite some issues and frustrations, Katana Zero offers incredibly satisfying gameplay for anyone looking for an action-packed challenge of both your thumbs and your wits. While it has a short runtime, around 4-5-ish hours, it doesn't overstay its welcome and is sure to leave you wanting more. Katana Zero's narrative centres around a veteran undergoing therapy while working as an assassin, picking up his contracts from his therapist. As these murderous jobs get more complicated, so too does the assassin's life as he becomes entangled in a web of gang warfare, government conspiracies, PTSD and surrogate fatherhood? I don't want to touch too much on Katana Zero's story, as its narrative and themes are best left to the individual player to sort through and mull over themselves. It's a very interpretive game, and I'm not sure any two people will walk away from it with the same exact impression. Think Twin Peaks mixed with Afro Samurai, and you'll get an idea of what's in store for you. There is one minor thing I wanted to mention, as it stood out a lot to me, but this will be very slightly spoilery. So if that bothers you, skip ahead. I'll try and put a timestamp on there for you to skip to. At a certain point in the story, the question of why the assassin continues to kill comes up. And the suggested answer is that his apparent invincibility and the cycle of death that comes with it have inured him to the unpleasantness of killing. He kills simply because he kills. It's what he's told to do and it has no consequence. His life has become a meaningless cycle of riskless murder. And as I sat and watched this play out, I couldn't help but wonder if Axisoft were pulling a Yoko Taro. Was the game talking about the assassin or the player? Was this a reflection on video games and their usual focus on wanton slaughter, inuring players to murder, something that should carry a whole lot more gravity even in a video game, just as surely as the gamification of murder he'd been through done to the assassin? Obviously, the argument of games turning us into mass murderers and criminals is, and always has been, ridiculous, but I appreciate that the game asks just what this is doing to us. The moment rose questions that carried a lot of poignancy, and it was a fantastic way of tying the narrative and themes into the gameplay mechanics, which is something that I always appreciate in a game. Without giving anything away, Katana Zero is a surreal, well-written, contemplative tale with a quirky and memorable cast that engaged me with its tricky themes and trying to piece together just what was going on. The only issue I had is that it feels like Act 1 of a story when I was expecting a complete narrative. While this did leave me wanting more, it was with a sense of deflation rather than excitement. And while it doesn't take away from how much I enjoyed the story that is there, I do think this should have been marketed as an episode 1 or a chapter 1 of a larger story to avoid the feeling that it isn't finished. But then I suppose it might not have sold as well, which they wouldn't have liked. It does feel a little bit like we've been hoodwinked, to be honest. Katana Zero's crowning achievement is perhaps the wrapping it's all tied up in. Its stylish world is cloaked in a visual and aural splendour that perfectly encapsulates the neo-noir mood it strives for. The world is rendered in beautiful pixel art, outdoing the aesthetic's usual limitations by injecting scenes with immaculate detail. This, combined with its art style, do the game's ability to engross you in the setting a world of good, as well as making the combat sections easily readable without sacrificing the little touches that give the visuals so much character. Its colour palette helps too, capturing the futuristic neo-noir aesthetic with its vibrant neon colours, balanced with the grungier, more dystopian elements of the look. It's a vibe that's mirrored in Wick Recordings' amazing soundtrack, a collection of synthwave beats that sound right out of the height of 80s sci-fi cinema. The music fits the tone of the game perfectly, as well as driving the intensity of action sequences up or adding some sobriety to certain scenes when necessary. Despite feeling narratively incomplete and some frustrating drawbacks of its otherwise excellent gameplay, Katana Zero is a very easy recommendation for me to make with those caveats. If you're into high-octane action with a slight puzzle element, trippy stories with depths to plunder, and a perfectly envisaged retro-futuristic aesthetic, you owe it yourself to check out Katana Zero. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you want to see more like it, then, subscribe, click the little bell so you get notified of releases, and see you next time.